The Beach Boys record Smile is ubiquitous in the music culture for being known as one of the greatest albums never made. Smile receives a lot of attention, even today, and I would argue that's deservedly so. I mean, not only you have, good vibrations off this album, one of the Beach Boys' most commercially and critically popular songs in their canon, but you also have songs like Surf's Up, which I thought was so absolutely fantastic, I even made a video about it myself. But did you know there is another lost Beach Boys album? A record that is talked about far less often, and an album that was supposed to be part of that Brian's back return to form after his infamous hiatus in the early 70s. Adult Child is the subject on the board today, and the question is, why is this album forgotten? Or at the very least, why is it not talked about anywhere near as much as Smile? Is it possible that it is better than Smile? Is it one of the most interesting creative records ever made? Or is it better off forgotten? Those are the questions that I'm seeking to answer today. Now, the context of both Smile and Adult Child are very interesting because they both follow what many would consider to be extreme highlights in the band's career. Pet Sounds was the record that was supposed to directly precede Smile, and today is known as one of the most culturally relevant, impactful records in the popular canon, especially for music at the time. And while the album Love You might not get that same attention across the board, many die-hard Beach Boys fans will tell you that it's one of, if not the best records Brian has ever conceived. But that said, there are a lot of substantial differences between Pet Sounds and Love You. Okay, class, get ready to take some notes because we're getting to an important concept. Bam, this man right here. This is a character by the name of Thump Wilson. Now, Thump Wilson is the fictitious fourth Wilson brother, who, according to the wonderful folklore of the internet, was a neglected member of the Beach Boys that wrote some of their more eccentric, oddball songs. Now, you don't really need to know the lore of Thump Wilson. You can just take a look at him, and you pretty much got all you need to know. But I will tell you, I thought that Thump Wilson was just a fairy tale. I thought that he was a made-up character. But that was until I heard Love You. Now, if you can call Brian Wilson a genius for writing some of the most creative and timeless songs in the 60s, then you could equally say that Brian is off the walls insane on this album, and the living embodiment of Thump Wilson. Famously, this record features songs about the solar system, about Johnny Carson, about Brian's love for his children and other children, and of course, Thump Wilson classics like Ding Dang, Yes? Now, this record is insane. It's whimsical, it's got a sense of nostalgia to it, but more than anything, it is just outright fun. And talking about musical innovations, this record has some of the darkest synths that you will ever hear, paired against insanely outlandish songs only a man like Brian or Thump could envision. So then we get to Adult Child, the record that was supposed to be the follow-up to Love You, and right off first listen, we can see a lot of similarities. As the title suggests, you can pretty easily divide the songs on this album into two groups, being the adult songs and the child songs. Right off the bat on side one, you can see the distinction that is made between these two groups of songs, with outlandishly wacky songs like Help Is On The Way, and arguably the most hated Beach Boy song ever written in Hey Little Tomboy. Now let's get this out of the way right now, okay? For some reason, of all the songs they could have picked, Hey Little Tomboy was actually reused on MIU album, an album that was officially released, and if you've heard the version on that record and thought that it was disgusting and outrageous, then wait till you hear this one. But I digress. These songs clearly occupy the child aspect of this record, the absurdity, the wacky nature of the musicality, and the way the songs seem to void all context and exist on their own without any reference. Now you got the adult songs, which are almost the complete polar opposite. Now, as I said, a defining factor on the album Love You is the dark, ominous synths that seem to pervade every song. Well, here, the adult songs are basically big band arrangements. Now, if I didn't know that I was listening to a Beach Boys album and one of these songs came on, I wouldn't be surprised to hear Sinatra or Tony Bennett singing. The songs Deep Purple and It's All Over Now are great examples here because they not only showcase this drastic change in musical structure and composition that defines the adult songs, but also the lyrical quality. These songs absolutely feel more melancholic and seem to be written from a more weathered perspective. I mean, just look at these lyrics from It's All Over Now. The noise outside my window carries on, like distant bugles, love is very gone, it's over now. It took a part of me, the heart of me, to watch it fade away. Now we can compare that to a song like Help Is On The Way. Stark naked in front of my mirror, a pudgy person somehow did appear. Seems lately, all I've eaten sugar and fat. It's getting obvious that's not where it's at. A big pop and triply chin. Oh, what condition my condition was in. laughing at myself at what a crying shame. Whatever happened to my Greek godly frame? Now, it is certainly an absurd and jarring listen to get through this album, because these songs come back to back, and I'm supposed to take it seriously. But you certainly couldn't criticize the album for lacking in variety. In fact, this record gets arguably more interesting in the second half, because this is where the line gets a little bit blurred between the adult and the child songs. After all, here we see a cover of On Broadway, which is certainly a big band style song, but the lyric is either incredibly optimistic and hopeful, or a bit naive, very much in the vein of a child's youthful perspective of fame. And we also have my favorite song from this project, which is the closing track, Still I Dream of It, a deeply melancholic song about hoping to one day fall in love again. This is another very orchestrated track, but in a way it's kind of the exact opposite of On Broadway from a lyrical perspective. The character isn't naive about their situation, but it almost seems like they want to be. They yearn for a time when they felt that their life had more promise and potential than the reality that they see. I think it's easy to say that I prefer the musical stylings of the more orchestrated tracks on this album, but don't worry, because we still have some more off-the-walls insane songs on side 2 as well. Because I would be remiss to not mention Shortening Bread. Now, the 60s Brian Wilson is often defined by his love for the Ronettes single Be My Baby. But if that's the case, then this whack Brian's back period is Thump Wilson's love for Shortening Bread. There are countless first-hand testimonials depicting Brian sitting there at his piano, playing the song for hours at a time, for listening to it all the time, and even calling it the best song ever recorded. And here we have the Beach Boys' first crack at recording this song. It seems to me that this song will either annoy you to no end, or it will be absolutely hypnotizing. I can't really see there being much of a middle ground. Now, I will admit to you that I am not fully convinced that this is the greatest song ever recorded, but Brian's infatuation and obsession with it is still incredibly interesting. And for that reason, I'm glad it's here, and more so, I think that that's what makes this record so interesting. It's another example of Brian's creative spirit. Smile was off the walls and wild and experimental, and to be honest, so is Adult Child. But if I was to really look for something that makes Smile stand out so much more above this album, is the fact that I see no pop highlight songs on this album. I mean, trying to pick a song off this as a pop highlight, a song that would have been a hit, you get something like Hey Little Tomboy, which is an incredibly catchy song, but the lyrical subject matter is going to put off a large percentage of your audience right off the bat. And it's easy to say that the fact that this album doesn't have one standout pop highlight doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't worthy of being considered to be as artistically valid and ambitious and experimental as an album like Smile, but at the same time, I think that that's a good explanation as to why it isn't as well remembered today. But I still think that it's a shame that this album never came out, because this album and Love You are so unique and so distinct and experimental from not only anything that was going on at the time, but also anything that the Beach Boys had recorded up to that point. A lot of Beach Boys fans will say that the late 70s and 80s material of the band is some of the weakest in their discography, and it's hard to disagree because, at the bare minimum, it is not as creative or experimental or different from the rest of the popular music scene. An album like this is so absurd that it has to be noteworthy. Is it better than Smile? I think it would be very difficult to make an argument that it's musically superior, but is it as interesting? Absolutely. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think that this album should be recognized up there with Smile for a remarkable creative achievement from the band? Or do you think that perhaps it's understandable why the album is forgotten and not talked about as much as an album like Smile? I would be very interested to know what you guys think. But if there's one thing that we should all be able to agree on, it's that this man right here, Mr. Thump, is also a creative genius.